Something unfolds right now that most analysts are not even looking at correctly. It is April 6th, 2026, day 36 of Operation Epic Fury. And while the world is locked onto a single ticking clock, Trump's Tuesday, 8 p.m., deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face strikes on power plants and bridges, another layer of this war is moving in the dark. A layer that rarely makes headlines. A layer that may matter more than the deadline itself. Special operations forces are in the theater, and their presence changes the entire equation. So stay with me. Because what I'm about to break down, the assets, the missions, the fractures inside Iran's leadership, and what a Tuesday deadline actually means on the ground may completely change the way you understand how this war ends. Let's go back to where this all started, because context matters here. Operation Epic Fury was launched on February 28, 2026, when U.S. Central Command initiated a campaign targeting Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missile capabilities, naval assets, and regional proxy networks. According to the White House's official statement, President Trump's stated preference was always diplomacy, but the Iranian regime's continued pursuit of nuclear weapons, and what U.S. officials described as a 460 kilogram stockpile of 60% enriched uranium, enough for 11 nuclear bombs. According to Steve Witkoff, left what the administration called no alternative. And from day one, the military objectives were stated with unusual clarity. U.S. Central Command Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said on March 3rd, "Our military in the Middle East is undertaking an unprecedented operation to eliminate Iran's ability to threaten Americans, as they've been doing for nearly half a century." Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane broke it down even further. Destroy Iran's ballistic missile systems, destroy the Iranian Navy, and ensure Iran cannot rapidly rebuild or reconstitute its combat capability. 3 objectives. That's it. But 36 days in, where do we actually stand? Here's what the numbers tell you. Over 12,000 combat sorties have been flown. The Pentagon's casualty database, updated as of April 3rd, now officially lists Operation Epic Fury in its tracking system. 365 U.S. troops wounded in action. 13 killed. That's according to military.com reporting this week. Those numbers will shift as cases are reviewed and additional injuries are confirmed. But the important thing is this. The Department of Defense is now publicly tracking this conflict in its casualty database for the first time. That is a significant threshold. The air campaign has been staggering in its scale and intensity. According to the Atlantic Council's live tracker, current B-1 bomber deployments likely break the post-Cold War record for a concentrated deployment in a single theater. B-52 Stratofortress bombers have been conducting runs inside Iran since the first 100 hours of the operation, hitting ballistic missile sites and command and control posts. A-10 Warthogs, AH-64 Apaches, AC-130J Ghost Riders, and a growing fleet of MQ-9 Reapers are feeding real-time targeting data across all of it. But here's what the headline numbers don't capture. Iran is still shooting back. On April 3rd, an A-10C Thunderbolt was shot down by Iranian air defense fire. The pilot ejected and was recovered. A second A-10C was damaged during related operations and returned to base. An F-15E Strike Eagle was downed over Iranian territory. One crew member was rescued in what General Kane described on Monday as an incredibly brave and courageous mission. The other crew member, call sign Dude 44B, evaded capture using, in Kane's own words, every means available. Hegseth confirmed there were no U.S. casualties in the rescue mission. And when the weapons systems officer finally activated his emergency transponder, his first message was 3 words: God is good. Stop and sit with that for a second. This is not a clean war. It never was. There is no such thing. And now today, Monday, April 6th, we are at a moment that could either open a path to a ceasefire or trigger the most devastating escalation yet. Let's break down exactly what's happening right now in 3 announcements. Announcement number 1, Iran rejected the ceasefire, but the way they rejected it tells you everything. Egyptian, Pakistani, and Turkish mediators circulated a 4-5-day ceasefire proposal late Sunday. According to reporting from the Associated Press and confirmed by Axios, the plan was submitted to Iran's Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, and U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. The framework calls for an immediate halt to hostilities, reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and a 15 to 20-day window to negotiate a permanent peace settlement. Trump, speaking Monday morning on the White House South Lawn, called the proposal not good enough but a very significant step. Iran's response, according to Iranian state broadcaster IRNA, was to reject the temporary ceasefire and counter with a demand for a permanent end to the war. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Esmail Baghaei said at a press briefing Monday that negotiations were incompatible with ultimatums and threats to commit war crimes. But here's the detail most people glossed over. Pakistan's army chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir, was in contact all night long, per sources aware of the proposals cited by Reuters, with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and IRGC himself. That's not the kind of diplomatic activity that happens when talks have collapsed. That's the kind of activity that happens when both sides are one concession away from something real. A regional official involved in negotiations told the Associated Press, "We are still talking to both sides. This is not over." Announcement number 2. The IRGC is being decapitated, and this may be the biggest story of the entire war. On Monday, Israel's defense forces confirmed the assassination of Major General Mohammad Kazemi, head of intelligence for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. According to both Iranian state media and Israeli Defense Minister Katz, Kazemi was killed in an intelligence-led airstrike. This is not a small development. The head of IRGC intelligence, the man who ran Iran's operational counterintelligence, its targeting networks, and its domestic coercive apparatus, is gone. And that's not all. Israel also confirmed the elimination of Asghar Bakari, commander of the Quds Force Special Operations Unit. According to IDF spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, Bakari had personally planned attacks on Israel and U.S. targets in Syria and Lebanon. Israeli Defense Minister Katz stated, "Iran's leaders live with a sense of being targeted. We will continue to hunt them down one by one." Think about what this means operationally. The IRGC intelligence apparatus is losing its senior layer in real time. Command and control networks that took decades to build are being severed at the top. This is exactly the kind of attrition that creates the internal fractures Trump has been signaling publicly. On March 23rd, Trump posted to Truth Social that the U.S. had held very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities. Critically, he deliberately did not name who the Americans were speaking with on the Iranian side. According to an analysis published by Iran International, Trump's statements were actively fracturing the Iranian regime, applying pressure not just militarily, but psychologically, creating uncertainty about who inside the leadership was talking to Washington and who wasn't. IRGC can speak all he wants, but if someone above him or around him is the one actually at the table, that changes the entire negotiating dynamic. Announcement number 3. The deadline is real, and Special Operations Forces are the scalpel that makes it enforceable. Trump has set Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time as the deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. If they don't, he has threatened to destroy power plants and bridges, infrastructure that is vital to Iranian civilian life. Legal experts, cited by NPR, have stated that attacking civilian infrastructure without a direct military nexus would constitute a war crime under international law. Iran's Central Military Command warned Monday of much more devastating retaliatory operations if civilian targets are struck, according to a statement carried by state broadcaster IRIB. This is the most dangerous 24 hours of the entire conflict. But here's the layer that isn't being discussed. The decision-makers in Washington are not choosing between bombing and not bombing. They are choosing between different kinds of pressure. And Special Operations Forces give them a third option, one that doesn't involve leveling cities. Subscribe to Daily Brief right now. Tap the notification bell, because what I'm about to walk you through on the Special Forces picture is the part that changes your entire read of this situation. Let's talk about what's actually on the ground. U.S. troop presence in the region now exceeds 50,000, according to multiple defense tracking sources. Within that broader force, there are confirmed reports of special operations teams in the low hundreds to approximately 1,000 personnel drawn primarily from Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC. These assets include the 75th Ranger Regiment, the Navy SEALs, and Delta Force operators. Additionally, between 1,000 and 2,000 members of the 82nd Airborne are positioned in the theater, providing rapid reinforcement capability. The 75th Rangers are configured for direct action raids, airfield seizures, and rapid terrain seizure operations via parachute insertion, helicopter, or maritime approach. The Rangers don't need long runways. They don't need extensive logistics tails. They go in fast, they hit hard, and they create conditions for follow-on forces. The Navy SEALs bring maritime capabilities that are uniquely suited to this conflict: beach landings, vessel interdictions, underwater demolitions against coastal defenses, and covert reconnaissance of battle damage at IRGC naval compounds, nuclear sites, and hardened bunkers, the kind of assessment that a satellite cannot make. You want to know if the centrifuges at Isfahan are still spinning? You don't learn that from a drone feed. You learn that from boots on the ground with radiation detection equipment. And Delta Force. Delta Force operators are likely the tip of this entire spear. If there is a mission to eliminate or capture high-value IRGC leadership, the people who replace the intelligence chief killed today, the commanders of the remaining missile units, the figures controlling the Strait choke points, Delta is the unit that makes that happen. Quickly, quietly, in the middle of the night, when their targets are in their worst nightmares. Ask Nicolas Maduro how that works. Delta went into Venezuela and extracted him in his most vulnerable moment. The speed, the precision, the completeness of that operation, that's the template. Now layer in the air assets that support all of this. The A-10 Thunderbolt II is the ground operator's best friend. Titanium cockpit armor, GAU, 8 Avenger 30mm cannon spinning at 7,000 rounds per minute, firing depleted uranium penetrators that turn armored vehicles and fast attack craft into scrap from a mile away. It carries Maverick missiles, unguided rockets, and precision bombs. When special operators are executing a coastal raid or a direct action mission, having an A-10 on station overhead means any counterattack gets vaporized before it can consolidate. That's not close air support. That's a force multiplier that changes the entire risk calculus. The AC-130J Ghost Rider brings persistent firepower at night, 105mm howitzer, 30mm cannon, precision-guided munitions. It can orbit a target area for hours, providing eyes and guns simultaneously. And the MQ-9 Reaper drones feed continuous targeting data that links every platform together in real time. This is not a ground invasion. This is a scalpel. Let's talk about the maritime dimension now, because the Strait of Hormuz is the entire pressure point. The Strait of Hormuz in peacetime carries approximately 1/5 of the world's oil and natural gas supply. According to Reuters, Iran has used control of that waterway as its primary strategic lever in this conflict. The IRGC Navy stated Sunday that the strait will never return to its former state, especially for America and Israel. That's a maximalist position for public consumption. But here's the geography. Karg Island handles roughly 90% of Iran's oil exports. Control access to Karg, and you control the financial oxygen supply to the IRGC. Special operations teams operating from amphibious-ready groups, including the USS Tripoli and the USS Boxer, both confirmed in the Arabian Sea, could execute coastal raids to clear IRGC fast attack boat concentrations, conduct underwater demolitions against naval choke points, and perform vessel interdiction operations without planting a flag on any piece of Iranian territory. The Marine Expeditionary Units aboard those ships bring marine recon capabilities that are purpose-built for exactly this kind of amphibious pressure operation. The fast attack boats are the hard problem here. There are hundreds of them. You can't hit every boat with a JDAM, but you can close the entrance to the port those boats operate from. Seal the port, the boats don't leave. The math changes entirely. And Army Rangers could seize the small airfields adjacent to key IRGC naval compounds along the Persian Gulf coast, enabling follow-on operations with a minimal footprint. You establish air superiority with the A-10S and AC-130S. You put Rangers on the airfield, you operate from that position, and you never have to announce to the world that you're there. That's the special operations model. Small footprint, maximum leverage, scalpel, not sledgehammer. Now, let's talk about the nuclear dimension, because this is where things get genuinely complex. Isfahan was struck last week. Isfahan is home to critical air bases and nuclear-related sites, and here is the fundamental intelligence problem that no satellite can solve. Was the nuclear program actually neutralized? You don't know, not from the air. You can measure the physical destruction, but measuring whether enrichment capability has been permanently eliminated, whether specific centrifuge cascades are still operational in hardened underground facilities, requires human assessment, radiation sampling, technical exploitation of surviving infrastructure, sensitive site exploitation, or SSE in JSOC terminology. This is one of the primary use cases for having Delta Force and SEAL teams in the theater. They don't just shoot, they gather intelligence, they exploit sites, they bring back hard drives, documents, and technical data that tell commanders and policymakers what was actually destroyed and what wasn't. That's the kind of battle damage assessment you can brief to a president. Trump himself said on March 31st, "I don't even think about it. I just know that it's so deeply buried, it's going to be very hard for anybody to recover it." That's a public signal. But the intelligence community needs more than a public signal. They need verified data, and that's what special operators can provide. Let's pause here and be honest about something, because this is where the analysis has to get uncomfortable. If the Tuesday deadline passes and Iran has not opened the Strait of Hormuz, the United States faces a fork in the road with no clean options. The first path, a diplomatic breakthrough in the next 18 hours that no one currently sees on the horizon. The Pakistani mediators are still talking. The Egyptians and the Turks are still in the room. But Iran's public position, a rejection of the 4-5-day ceasefire, and a demand for permanent peace guarantees, including financial reparations, is currently incompatible with any timeline Trump has publicly committed to. Axios reported Monday that a source with direct knowledge of the negotiations said mediators are highly concerned that a U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran's energy infrastructure could trigger retaliatory attacks against Gulf Arab states that would be genuinely destructive. Kuwait, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia already activated air defense systems Monday morning in response to incoming Iranian fire. Those countries are bearing real costs right now. A massive escalation of strikes on Iranian civilian infrastructure could turn the entire regional political situation upside down. The second path, the strikes happen. Power plants, bridges. Iran retaliates against Gulf civilian infrastructure. Oil prices, already elevated throughout this conflict, spike to levels the global economy has not seen. Energy rationing, already beginning in some markets, according to Time magazine, accelerates into a genuine crisis. Iran's military command warned Monday in a statement carried by state broadcaster IRIB that if civilian targets are struck, the next stages of our offensive and retaliatory operations will be much more devastating and widespread. That is not a bluff from a country operating from a position of strength. The Iranian conventional military has been devastated over 5 weeks. Vice President Vance stated on March 26th, "The Iranian conventional military is effectively destroyed. They don't have a navy. They don't have the ability to hit us like they could have even a few weeks ago." But a wounded adversary with nothing left to lose can still cause enormous damage through asymmetric means: proxies, drones, missiles targeted at civilian infrastructure in Gulf states that the U.S. depends on for regional basing and political cooperation. Neither path is clean. Neither path is guaranteed. And the special operations forces sitting in the theater right now represent a third option: the ability to apply precision pressure below the threshold of the massive escalation that everyone fears. Hit the command nodes, degrade the remaining missile capacity, execute covert reconnaissance on nuclear sites, cut off the financial flows to the IRGC. All of it targeted. All of it is undeniable. None of it requires the United States to publicly announce that it just bombed the electrical grid of a country of 90 million people. Here is the strategic picture as of this moment. Monday, April 6th, 2026. The IRGC is losing its leadership layer in real time. Its intelligence chief is dead. Its Quds Force Special Operations Commander is dead. Its fast attack boats are getting chewed up by A-10s every time they move. Its missile stockpiles have been degraded severely over 5 weeks of relentless B-52 and B-1 strikes. Its navy, for all practical purposes, no longer exists as a conventional force. But the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, the global oil supply remains constrained, and a 4-8 Our deadline is ticking down to what could be the most consequential decision of this war. The United States has positioned exactly the right mix of assets to make this next phase work, if the decision is to pursue a scalpel strategy rather than a sledgehammer. 12,000 sorties worth of air power to own the sky. Marine expeditionary units to project maritime force. A-10S and AC-130S to provide persistent close air support. SEAL teams to clear the Strait and hit the coastal targets. Rangers to seize airfields and missile caches. Delta Force to remove the last senior IRGC commanders who are still trying to hold this regime together through sheer will, and the 82nd Airborne standing by to reinforce any of it at a moment's notice. The Atlantic Council noted this week that Operation Epic Fury is stressing U.S. military capabilities in ways that will have lasting impact on American readiness in other theaters, particularly regarding China. The B-1 deployment likely breaks post-Cold War concentration records. The loss of an E-3 AWACS early warning aircraft degrades a capability the U.S. has limited inventory to replace. These are real costs that extend beyond the Middle East. But if the objective is achieved, if Iran's ability to threaten the Strait, sustain a nuclear program, and project conventional military power is permanently eliminated, the administration believes the strategic calculus favors the action. Secretary Hegseth said it plainly on March 26th. Operation Epic Fury is not an endless war. It's a decisive campaign with clear objectives. No nukes, no Navy, no missile program, no proxies. 4 lines. That's the finish line. And right now, as of today, 3 of those 4 lines are effectively complete. The question is whether the Strait gets opened through a deal struck in the next 18 hours, or whether it gets opened the hard way. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. I want to know what you think happens before Tuesday's deadline expires. Does Iran blink? Does Trump blink? Or does something entirely unexpected happen, the way this war has surprised everyone at every major turning point for 5 straight weeks? Here's the question that I keep coming back to. The IRGC is a mafia structure. It is not an ideological organization in the pure sense. It is a patronage network that requires cash flow to function. And cash flow runs through oil, and oil runs through the Strait of Hormuz. If the United States, through special operations, combined with continued air power, can cut the IRGC off from the revenue that pays its people, what happens to IRGC loyalty when the paychecks stop? That's not a military question, that's a political economy question, and it may be the most important variable in this entire conflict that no one is modeling correctly. If you want analysis that goes 3 layers deeper than what you're seeing in the mainstream coverage, this is the place. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop your read of Tuesday's deadline in the comments below.